sometimes the most restless places are the ones meant to give us peace. A bedroom should feel like a sanctuary, but for many people, it feels like a space that holds tension, distance, or just something off. They say love fades over time, that people grow apart, that sleep gets worse with age. But maybe, just maybe, it's not the people. Maybe it's the room itself. I've seen couples drift slowly in the same bed, under the same roof, but with a coldness they couldn't explain. I've seen people wake up more tired than when they went to sleep, not knowing the energy around them had never truly rested. This video isn't about furniture. It's about energy, the kind that either holds us together or quietly pulls us apart. If you've ever felt like something's stuck, like love isn't flowing, or rest just doesn't reach you, this is for you. Today, we'll go through 7 quiet mistakes many people make in their bedrooms, things that block connection, kill intimacy, or store stale energy without you even realizing. Each one comes with a shift, simple, grounded, and real. No fluff, no superstition. Just the quiet truth your space might be trying to tell you. And if even one of these resonates, take a breath and know. It's not too late to change what surrounds you. Let's start with the foundation, the very thing we build our rest and our love on, the bed. Ben lived in rural Ohio, in a modest rental home he'd moved into after the separation. Mid-40s, art teacher, the kind of man who didn't speak much unless he was holding a brush. His bedroom was large for the house, with soft gray carpet and a window facing the open fields. He placed the bed right in the center, no wall behind it, no headboard, no anchoring, just space. He said it felt freer that way, like he could move in any direction, but movement wasn't the thing he needed. His daughter, Marcy, came home from college for the weekend, and while she didn't say it outright, she lingered in the bedroom longer than usual, looked at the way the bed stood in the middle like something unfinished. She didn't push, just helped him fold laundry, left a candle on the nightstand, and hugged him a little tighter before she left. That night, Ben woke up again, 3:14 a.m., same as most nights. Not startled, just halfway present, like he hadn't actually dropped into sleep at all. His breath was shallow, his shoulders stiff. He lay still for a moment, staring into the ceiling, trying to name the thing he couldn't explain. It wasn't noise. It wasn't grief, at least not the loud kind. It was the feeling of not being fully held. A bed with no back becomes a bed with no story. It sits in the room like a question that never lands. The body knows it's exposed. The heart, too. There's nowhere for the energy to press against, nothing to lean into. And eventually, rest becomes a kind of pretending. You lie down, but don't truly arrive. He didn't want to admit it, but since moving in, sleep had turned into a task. He'd wake up tired, go through the day slightly off kilter, and chalk it up to change, to age, to stress. But maybe it wasn't any of those. Maybe it was the way the room forgot how to hold him. 2 days later, he shifted the bed. Not because someone told him to, because the room felt like it was waiting for something. He placed it against the east wall, an old habit from the previous house. Dug out a solid wood headboard from the garage, something worn but firm. Attached it slowly, carefully. Then he added 2 lamps, one on each side, balanced, not because he needed them both, but because something in him wanted symmetry again. That night, the air felt warmer, not in temperature, but in weight. He fell asleep without remembering the moment it happened. And in the morning, his first breath was full. If the bed has no headboard, if it floats in the room like an island, The nervous system doesn't know where to land. It stays slightly on guard. That state may be subtle, but over time it eats into everything: rest, closeness, the sense of being supported. Push the bed against a wall with stillness, not a window, not a mirror, not a door. Install a headboard that holds its shape. Wood or soft padded fabric, no hollow frames, no sharp edges. Place something on each side of the bed, even if you sleep alone. A lamp, a small plant, a photo of something that still means something. Let the space speak. You're not halfway here. You are home. Support doesn't always look like a person. Sometimes it looks like a surface you can press against and not fall. And in Ben's case, once the bed settled, the room settled. But there was still one presence he hadn't confronted yet. Not the wall, not the bed, but the thing across from it, quiet, flat, always watching, even when the lights were off. Across from Ben's bed sat a flat-screen TV, mounted slightly too high, like a hotel install that never got adjusted. He rarely used it, maybe a show or two on weekends. Mostly it stayed off, black, reflective, quiet. But somehow it never felt like it was off. Even with no sound, no movement, it held a kind of attention, like it was watching. He started noticing it more after fixing the bed. The room felt warmer, softer, but that screen remained cold. Still, almost alert. It caught light from the window during the day, and at night, even in the dark, it mirrored just enough to show a faint outline of the bed of him. It was subtle, but the body noticed. A presence that didn't belong to rest. A mirror in disguise is still a mirror. And in Feng Shui, when something reflects your sleeping body back to you, it doesn't just bounce energy, it splits it. What's meant to be whole becomes two. And if you're already carrying stress, grief, or a fractured heart, that doubling deepens the unrest. For Ben, the shift wasn't dramatic, just quieter dreams that felt busier. A strange loop of images, thoughts, fragments. He'd wake up and feel like he'd been observed, not by a memory, not by a person, but by something uninvited. A rectangle in the dark, catching every movement. He thought about taking it down completely, but that felt drastic. So he tested something else first. A soft cotton cloth, earth-colored, slightly textured. He folded it and draped it gently over the screen each night before bed, like tucking something in. It changed the tone of the room, made it feel less interrupted, more held, more his. By the end of the week, sleep came easier. Not just faster, cleaner. As if the room had stopped watching and started listening. A TV directly across from the bed might feel normal, but in truth, it introduces a passive tension. Screens are made to glow, to reflect, to broadcast. Even when off, they hold charge. They carry the memory of noise. And in a room meant for stillness, they become an invisible doorway, open just enough for peace to slip through. If removing it isn't an option, soften it. Cover it with a piece of fabric that breathes, cotton, linen, not synthetic. Neutral colors, something that feels like part of the room, not a costume. And do it with intention, not to block, but to bless the space for rest. Because sometimes healing doesn't require breaking things down, just asking them to step back. If you've been struggling with restless nights or waking up with a mind that already feels loud, try this one shift tonight. And if it makes even a small difference, let someone know. Share it. These are the kinds of things people don't talk about until they do. And now, as the room grows quieter, a different kind of noise begins to matter. Not what's seen, but what's stored. Not the screens, but the symbols. The next mistake isn't about placement. It's about presence. about what we hang above our bed without realizing what it says. On the wall above Ben's bed hung a single black and white photograph. A lone pier stretching into still water, fog spilling off the edges. It had been a gift years ago from someone he used to love. He kept it because it was quiet, clean, matched the room, but he never really looked at it until the room began to change. After adjusting the bed, softening the lamps, and covering the TV, something in the space felt clearer, like it had started to breathe again. But that image, it stayed heavy. Every night, as he lay down, the pier seemed to drift further, not toward anything, just away. The thing about symbols is they don't shout. They sit, they wait. They shape how a room feels without needing permission. And when something hangs above the bed, the most vulnerable place in a home, it becomes a kind of silent anchor. What it holds, the body holds. What it shows, the heart starts to repeat. He began to wonder, why had he chosen that image? Or more honestly, why had he not removed it? Maybe because it had become invisible. Or maybe because some part of him felt familiar with the loneliness it carried. A bed is a place of return, of intimacy, rest, repair. And yet, many people hang solitary figures, cold landscapes, abstract shapes with no warmth or story. They call it art. But what is it really saying? He didn't toss the picture, just moved it to the hallway where it could be seen without pressing into him. In its place, he found an old print from a thrift store, two figures seated on a bench, laughing, their outlines barely touching but unmistakably connected. It wasn't expensive, wasn't his usual taste, but when he looked at it, his chest didn't tighten. It softened. Images matter, especially the ones above where you sleep. If what hangs above you is empty, sharp, or cold, some part of your energy may mirror that without knowing. And if it shows isolation, it can quietly reinforce the sense that connection is elsewhere. Replace solitary images with ones that carry warmth. Pairs, movement, symbols of harmony, not cliché, but clear, not sentimental, but soft. It doesn't need to be romantic. It just needs to feel alive. The energy you sleep beneath becomes part of how you wake. And now that the walls no longer echoed distance, Ben began to notice something subtler. Not the art, not the furniture, but the way he moved around the bed, the way only one side had space. Only one lamp got turned on. Only one path was clear. As if, in some quiet way, the room had already chosen to expect loneliness. Ben had always entered the bed from the left. That side had the lamp, the nightstand, the soft rug he liked under his feet. The other side pressed against the wall. No space, no light, no thought. For years, even when he was still married, that was just how it stayed. And now, alone in this new house, it felt logical, practical. But something about it had started to feel closed. After adjusting the bed and changing the picture above it, he began to notice how uneven the room truly was. Not just visually, but emotionally. The left side invited. The right side disappeared. There was a kind of imbalance that didn't shout, but it wore on the feeling of possibility, of openness, of welcome. A room doesn't need to say, "You're alone." Sometimes it just stops making space for anyone else. He realized the right side hadn't had a lamp in years. No pillow, no reachable drawer, no path wide enough for someone to move freely. It wasn't just the bed that had one entry, it was his life. The space reflected the internal truth he hadn't named yet. He had stopped expecting company. But rooms are like soil. What you stop preparing for stops growing. He moved the bed slightly, just enough to leave equal space on both sides, bought a second lamp, found a matching nightstand at the local flea market. It didn't cost much, but when he placed it there, opposite his own, something in the room shifted, not in sound or light, but in posture. Even though no one else slept there, the bed felt ready, balanced, no longer shaped for solitude. If one side of your bed is flush against the wall, or stacked with boxes, or blocked by furniture, ask why. Ask what part of your life no longer thinks it needs to be reachable. When a bed says, only one belongs, it's rarely just about sleep. Clear both sides, give equal space. Light both lamps, lay 2 pillows. You don't have to explain it to anyone, but the body will understand. And the energy around you will begin to echo that quiet opening. And so the room, little by little, unlearned its aloneness. But as the space grew more whole, something else stayed unsettled. Something colder, older, more invisible. It wasn't in the layout. It was in the reflection. In the surface across from the bed, the one that returned your gaze even when you looked away. Ben had left the mirror there because it came with the house. Tall, rectangular, framed in chipped wood, it leaned slightly forward, like a guest too polite to ask for attention. During the day, it felt harmless, just another object. But at night, it turned into something else entirely. He first noticed it after waking up suddenly, heart racing, with the feeling that someone was in the room. But Mabel was asleep at the foot of the bed. The lights were off. No sound. No movement, just that feeling. He sat there, breathing, waiting for the room to settle. And in the dim light from the hallway, he saw his own outline faintly reflected back. It's strange how seeing yourself in the dark can feel like seeing someone else. A mirror across from the bed holds more than your reflection. It holds your energy. Even when your eyes are closed, it bounces what you release, thoughts, tension, half-formed feelings, right back at you. You lie down to rest, but the room doesn't close. It stays open. The mirror stays awake. He'd never thought of it that way. To him, a mirror was neutral, but the body knows. And the soul, even more. In Feng Shui, mirrors are amplifiers. They double what they face. If that's nature or light or laughter, good. But if it's fatigue, loneliness, or a racing mind, the effect multiplies. You're not just trying to sleep. You're trying to sleep with your own unsettled reflection watching you. He didn't remove the mirror entirely. Instead, he covered it. A cotton throw, soft beige, woven loosely, the kind his mother used to keep over the back of the couch. He draped it over the glass each night before bed, not as a rule, but as a kindness. Within days, his body began to land deeper. He stopped waking with that alert edge. And slowly, the room forgot how to echo. If you sleep with a mirror facing the bed, pay attention. Not to the surface, but to how the space feels when your eyes are closed. Do you fully descend, or do you hover even in sleep? Cover it with something that breathes. Neutral tones. Natural textures. Not to hide it, but to give the room a boundary again. A signal that rest is not to be watched. And if the mirror can't be moved or covered, place something soft in front of it, plants, fabric panels, anything that interrupts the direct return. Stillness isn't just about quiet. It's about closing the loop. A mirror left open becomes a loop that never ends. And even as that loop was finally sealed, there was still something in the room that hummed beneath the stillness. Not visible, not reflective, but stitched into the very materials around him, what they were made of, what they carried, and what they allowed in without permission. Ben didn't decorate much. He said he liked things clean, muted, functional, he called it. The walls were a pale gray, the bedding a crisp white. The nightstands were black. The curtains were navy, heavy, pulled tight. On paper, it sounded calm, grown up. But when you stood in the room long enough, it felt like being in a waiting room that never called your name. It's easy to think neutral equals peace. That stripping color away means stripping away noise. But peace isn't silence, it's softness. And not all silence is soft. He'd chosen those colors after the divorce, said it felt good to start fresh. But now, a year in, it didn't feel like a beginning anymore. It felt like a pause that wouldn't unfreeze. Color doesn't just fill a room, it holds memory, vibration, temperature, and sharp lines, even if minimal, carry a kind of message. Precision that sometimes borders on distance. If everything in a room says, "Don't spill, don't wrinkle, don't stay too long," who is the space really being kept for? He realized the room looked finished, but it didn't feel lived in. Even Mabel avoided the bed during the day, preferring the hallway rug where the sunlight pooled. That was when he knew something was off, not just in the layout, but in the emotional tone the colors set. So he made small changes. He started with the bedding, replaced the white sheets with soft clay-colored ones. Muted, but warm. Swapped one navy curtain for a sheer oatmeal panel, just enough to let the light diffuse without glare. He placed a worn wool throw at the foot of the bed, a gift from years ago he had forgotten in the back of the closet. It smelled faintly of cedar and thyme, and he lit a candle that smelled like earth after rain. It wasn't a design makeover. It was a mood reset. The room didn't change him, but it gave him permission to come back into it, not as someone trying to maintain perfection, but as someone allowed to be at ease. If your bedroom leans cold, gray, blue, black, stark white, ask what part of you made those choices. Was it clarity you were craving, or was it distance? When everything around you is sleek and sharp, it can be hard for the heart to settle, hard for the nervous system to soften its edge. Balance the room with touchable textures, woven fabric, rounded corners, earth tones, soft neutrals. Add objects that don't just look clean but feel kind. A candle, a book with pages worn, a pair of slippers you actually use, not for show, for shelter. Because when the room feels warm, the body stops guarding. And when the body stops guarding, love of any kind has somewhere to land. But even warmth wasn't enough if the room kept carrying what the day left behind. At some point, Ben began to notice. No matter how soft the bed, how gentle the light, there was always a weight in the air at night. Invisible, but thick. As if the day hadn't fully let go of him, and maybe never had. Ben had made every physical change he could think of. The bed now had a solid back. The TV covered. The image above him felt like connection, not isolation. Both sides of the bed were open, ready. The mirror no longer stared. The room had warmth, texture, balance. But even with all that, some nights the weight returned. Not in the furniture, not in the light, in the air. It was subtle but real, a kind of invisible residue. Thoughts that didn't stop spinning. Emotions that didn't have a name but still took up space. The kind of energy that settles into corners and lingers, even when everything else looks right. That's when he realized. The room held onto the day because he hadn't told it not to. We think sleep begins when we turn off the lights, but the body listens for more than silence. It listens for a signal, a shift, a moment that says, "The day is done and you are allowed to let go now." Ben had never had a bedtime routine, no rituals. He brushed his teeth, turned off the lamp, laid down, hoped for rest. But hoping isn't the same as preparing. And in Feng Shui, space absorbs what we don't release. The unspoken, the undone, the words we swallow and the worries we carry from room to room. So he tried something small. Each night before bed, he opened the window for just a few minutes. No matter the season, let the air in, let the room exhale. He lit a stick of incense, nothing strong, just sandalwood, and let the smoke curl toward the corners. Sometimes he whispered a word, sometimes not. But his body began to understand this was the line, this was the close of day. He also started placing a bowl of water near the window, not for function, for symbolism. Water to hold what he didn't want to carry into sleep. Some mornings, he'd pour it out into the soil near the porch. Other days, he left it untouched, but the act itself was enough. A room that never gets reset becomes a sponge. And no matter how soft the bed or how perfect the lighting, if the energy of yesterday still lingers, sleep becomes labor. Create an ending, even if it's just a breath at the edge of the bed, a hand on the wall, a few quiet words that let the room know, I've done what I could today. The rest can wait. Because peace doesn't always come from design. Sometimes it comes from permission. And for Ben, once that permission was given, fully, quietly, the room finally stopped holding tension. Not because life got easier, but because rest became allowed. And as the house exhaled with him, it didn't feel like a retreat anymore. It felt like a return to something older than sleep, to something that had waited patiently for space to come back to life. Some bedrooms are quiet, but not peaceful. They hold no sound, yet carry too many echoes. And sometimes, the most restless places aren't the loudest, but the ones that mirror everything you've been avoiding. Ben didn't set out to change his bedroom. He thought he was just starting over, new house, clean lines, simple setup. But the space kept showing him things he hadn't yet faced. Not in words, not in symbols, in weight, in temperature, in how it felt to breathe at night. The twist was never in the furniture. It was in the realization that energy isn't invisible, it's physical. It clings to corners. It nestles into routines. It repeats through colors, light, reflections, absences. And once you begin to shift the space begins to shift you back. 7 small changes, none of them dramatic, but together, they turned a room that had become a holding cell into something closer to a sanctuary. If something in your room has been tugging at you, quietly, trust it. Peace doesn't always require noise to be missing. Sometimes, it just needs your presence to return. Thank you for letting this story unfold with you. If it stirred something, take a moment, not to react, but to reflect. And when you're ready to keep walking with us, the next video will take you deeper, into the meaning of what you keep in the bedroom. Drawers, objects, things you forgot were even there, because your room isn't just a place where you sleep. It's the part of you that holds what you haven't said aloud. Your space speaks. Wisdom listens.